Have you ever watched someone stumble through life, repeating the same mistakes over and over, and wondered, why didn't anyone tell them the secret earlier? The truth is, life doesn't hand out instruction manuals. But what if I told you that there are hidden skills, so simple yet so powerful, that mastering just one of them could save you years of heartache, regret, and wasted energy? Today, I'm going to share 7 of these life-saving skills. The ones nobody teaches, but everyone wishes they had learned sooner. The first key point is the skill of deep listening, the kind of listening that goes beyond words, beyond the surface, and reaches into the subtle spaces where truth quietly lives. Most people think listening is simply waiting for their turn to speak, nodding politely, or catching the obvious meaning of a conversation. But real listening is an art. It is a quiet presence that demands you set aside your assumptions, your judgments, and even your own story for a while. It is noticing the pauses, the cracks in someone's voice, the hesitations that hide fear or uncertainty. When you truly listen, you create a space where others feel seen, not just their actions, but their inner landscapes. It is like holding a mirror, not to reflect yourself, but to reflect them back to themselves with clarity they may have forgotten. When you practice this skill, you start to notice patterns in people and situations that others overlook. You see the subtle signals that hint at deeper truths, the things that, if ignored, can lead to misunderstanding or regret. Imagine walking through a crowded street with your eyes open but your heart blind. You might see movement, but you miss the life hidden in the faces around you. Deep listening opens your heart's eyes. It allows you to hear what is said and what is left unsaid. And in that silence, in that attentive space, people begin to trust you. Not because you said the right things, but because you understood them in ways they never expected. This skill also teaches patience, a patience that stretches the mind and softens the impulse to react immediately. When you are really listening, you resist the urge to interrupt, to correct, to advise before fully understanding. You realize that most people don't need immediate solutions. They need to be fully heard first. It is in this listening that connections are forged and conflicts are quietly diffused. Listening becomes a kind of quiet power, one that doesn't demand attention but commands respect, because people sense your presence is a safe place. Like water filling the cracks in stone, deep listening seeps into the spaces of life that others rush past. At the same time, this skill reflects inward. As you learn to listen to others deeply, you begin to recognize the voices inside yourself that go unnoticed. The doubts, the fears, the subtle nudges of intuition. There is a parallel between hearing someone else fully and hearing yourself fully. Both require slowing down, both require attention, and both reward you with insight that is rarely spoken aloud. You start to notice patterns in your own thinking, repeated loops of worry or habit that shape your decisions. Listening becomes a form of mindfulness, not in the distant, abstract sense, but in the raw, practical sense of noticing what is alive and real right here, right now. Deep listening is not passive. It is an active engagement with life that asks you to care, to be present, and to suspend the need to dominate every interaction with your own voice. It's a skill that allows empathy to grow naturally, not as a theory or a principle, but as a lived experience. You begin to see the small, almost invisible ways your attention changes everything. The way a pause makes someone feel respected. The way a gentle acknowledgement makes someone feel understood. The way remembering a small detail from a previous conversation makes someone feel valued. These are the moments where life shifts quietly, profoundly, because someone bothered to truly hear. And yet, learning to listen this way also challenges you. It exposes impatience, self-centeredness, and the habit of rushing through life with only a partial understanding of people and events. You notice how often you skim over words or tune out emotions because they feel inconvenient, uncomfortable, or irrelevant. But when you commit to listening fully, You encounter not just others but yourself. You see how easily your mind wants to argue, fix, or move on, and how much richness you've been missing by doing so. There is a strange humility in this, a humbling realization that the world is speaking constantly, and you have only been catching fragments of the story. Mastering deep listening rewires the way you experience relationships, work, and life itself. It allows you to step into moments fully, to respond with awareness rather than reaction, and to notice truths that remain hidden to most. The gift of this skill is subtle but enormous. People lean in when you speak because they know you understand. Situations unfold with clarity because you perceive what is essential. And you begin to navigate life not with assumptions but with real understanding. It is a quiet revolution, one conversation at a time, one genuine presence at a time, transforming ordinary exchanges into moments of connection, insight, and profound impact. The second key point is the skill of emotional awareness, the quiet ability to notice what stirs inside before it spills into action. Most of us drift through life as if our feelings are unpredictable storms, reacting to whatever gusts blow through without ever looking at the clouds forming above. Emotional awareness is the radar that detects those storms early, giving you the chance to navigate instead of being swept away. It is not about suppressing anger, fear, or sadness. It is about understanding them, tracing their roots, and recognizing the way they shape your choices long before they manifest in regret or confusion. When you begin to see your emotions clearly, you step out of the role of passive participant in your own life and become the one steering the ship. When you cultivate this skill, you start to notice the subtle signals that often go unnoticed. The tightness in your chest before an argument, the quiet irritation that simmers before it erupts, the restless energy that precedes a poor decision. These are not inconveniences to ignore, they are whispers from within, guiding you toward clarity if you are willing to listen. Emotional awareness allows you to separate the impulse from the insight, the raw reaction from the lesson hidden beneath it. Like a gardener who tends both the flowers and the weeds, you begin to understand which parts of your inner world need attention, which need release, and which are ready to bloom. This skill changes how you handle conflict. When you are aware of your emotions, you no longer need to lash out or withdraw in fear. Instead, you recognize the moment when your feelings are driving you toward knee-jerk reactions and you choose response over reflex. You see how often relationships suffer not because of the other person but because we have been blind to the forces inside ourselves. Emotional awareness is like holding a lantern in a dark room. Suddenly, every corner becomes visible, and the shadows that once caused fear are illuminated and understood. It also reshapes your relationship with failure and disappointment. Most people react to setbacks with blame, frustration, or avoidance. Emotional awareness allows you to observe the first wave of disappointment, name it, and examine it without letting it define you. You start to see that sadness is not a trap, but a teacher. Frustration not an enemy, but a signal. And fear not a wall, but a doorway. By recognizing the textures of your inner life, you gain a quiet resilience, a sense of being able to move through pain with understanding rather than being buried under it. This skill extends into every corner of your life. In work, it allows you to notice when stress is distorting your thinking before mistakes happen. In friendships, it helps you hear the unspoken worries and joys of others because you have practiced noticing your own. In moments of personal growth, it uncovers the hidden patterns, the repeated loops of thought or behavior that quietly dictate your choices. Emotional awareness is not flashy or loud, but it is a superpower that touches every decision, every relationship, and every opportunity. Learning to cultivate emotional awareness also teaches patience with yourself. You realize that every feeling does not need to be acted on immediately, that the storm inside will pass if you allow it to move rather than force it into action. You learn to sit with discomfort without fear, to acknowledge your own vulnerabilities without shame, and to give yourself the space to respond thoughtfully instead. F. Impulsively. It is a skill that quietly shifts your life from reaction to reflection, from chaos to calm, from being driven by unseen currents to steering with intention. Finally, emotional awareness opens the door to authenticity. Once you recognize and understand your emotions, you begin to see the difference between the self you project and the self that is real. You notice where fear has led you to pretend, where anger has led you to silence, where desire has led you to compromise. This skill gives you the courage to live closer to your true self, to make choices rooted in insight rather than impulse, and to connect with the world not through pretense but through honesty. It is a subtle transformation, invisible to others at first, but it reshapes every interaction, every choice, every moment of your life from the inside out. The third key point is the skill of saying no, a skill far more powerful than most people realize. It is not simply refusing requests or turning down opportunities. It is the quiet art of protecting your life, your energy, and your focus. Every yes we give without thought is a piece of ourselves we surrender, often to things that don't matter, to people who don't value us, to obligations that pull us away from the life we are meant to live. Saying no is not about selfishness. It is about respect. Respect for your time, your growth, and the potential that lies dormant inside you, waiting for space to breathe and expand. When you begin to practice say no, you start noticing how often you have been agreeing to things out of fear. Fear of disappointing others, fear of being judged, fear of missing out. These fears chain you to paths that lead nowhere, while the quiet, unseen paths toward growth remain blocked by your own hesitation. Learning to say no is like clearing a path through a dense forest. Every refusal removes obstacles, creating room to move forward intentionally, to step toward the things that truly matter. It is a skill that reshapes the way you live, from a life of reaction to a life of deliberate choice. Saying no also teaches clarity. When you are honest about what you will and won't accept, your priorities become sharper. You begin to see the difference between a fleeting distraction and a meaningful opportunity, between empty commitments and genuine connections. Life is not generous with time, and every yes carries a cost. Learning to evaluate what deserves your attention is like learning to read the wind before a storm. You gain the ability to steer your life rather than being tossed about by circumstance. This skill does not come easily because it challenges the habits of people-pleasing and the desire for approval that have been ingrained in us since childhood. It forces you to confront the discomfort of letting someone down or facing their disappointment. Yet in facing that discomfort, you discover a deeper truth. Most people respect honesty far more than forced compliance, and your boundaries do not push people away. They reveal who is willing to respect your space and who is not. Saying no is not a wall. It is a filter that allows the right people and opportunities to enter your life. When you master this skill, you also cultivate inner peace. The anxiety that comes from overcommitment, the exhaustion that comes from overextending, begins to fade. Each no you speak is a small act of liberation, a reclaiming of your energy and attention. You start to notice how much more presence and focus you have when you are not constantly stretched thin by obligations that serve no higher purpose. Saying no becomes a tool not just for protection, but for productivity, creativity, and joy. It also transforms your relationships. People are drawn to those who have boundaries because those people operate from integrity rather than convenience. When you say no thoughtfully, you invite authenticity into your interactions. You no longer agree out of habit, politeness, or fear. You agree because it aligns with your values and your purpose. And when you say no, you learn to communicate it with clarity and empathy, showing that your refusal is not rejection of the person, but a conscious choice to honor your own life. Over time, saying no becomes a practice of self-trust. You learn to listen to the quiet voice inside that knows what you can handle, what you need, and what will bring growth. You stop seeking permission from the outside world to protect your time and energy, and instead follow the rhythm of your own judgment. Every no spoken with awareness is a step toward freedom, a signal that you are willing to invest in yourself before spreading yourself thin for the world. It is a skill that quietly transforms ordinary days into life lived on purpose, one decision at a time. The fourth key point is the skill of delayed gratification, the quiet power of choosing long-term gain over immediate comfort. Most people live as if life is a string of impulses, reaching for what feels good right now and paying the price later without even realizing it. Delayed gratification is the ability to pause, to resist the lure of the instant, and to act with foresight. It is a discipline that asks you to trust the unseen, to invest energy in a future that cannot be touched yet, but whose rewards will reshape the life you are building. It is the difference between wandering through days on autopilot and walking with intention towards something meaningful. When you begin practicing this skill, you notice how often the present tempts you to choose convenience over growth. A few extra hours scrolling on your phone, a fleeting indulgence in food, an immediate reaction to frustration. These moments may seem small, but they compound. Every time you choose the easy option, you defer the life you could be creating. Delayed gratification is about seeing beyond the surface, about looking at the patterns of your habits and recognizing which will lead to fulfillment and which will lead to regret. Tea is like planting seeds and caring for them patiently, knowing the harvest will be worth the wait even if the ground looks barren today. This skill also teaches patience in a way few other practices can. Waiting is uncomfortable. It forces you to face uncertainty, to trust a process you cannot control. And yet, it is in that waiting that character grows. Each decision to hold back, to invest, to act with foresight is a statement of self-respect and vision. You learn to recognize the fleeting temptations that promise pleasure but deliver emptiness. And you start to value the steady, quiet rewards that emerge only with persistence and care. Life begins to feel less like a series of emergencies and more like a deliberate path you are choosing step by step. Delayed gratification reshapes your understanding of success. Most people think achievement comes from immediate results, from visible progress that can be measured today. But real success, the kind that changes your life, builds security and creates freedom, comes from consistent effort over time, from small choices stacked one on top of the other. It is the accumulation of restraint, focus, and patience that separates the extraordinary from the ordinary. By delaying pleasure, you allow your efforts to compound in ways that surprise even you, creating momentum that cannot be rushed. This skill also strengthens resilience. Choosing to wait, to work, to invest in the unseen forces you to confront frustration, doubt, and temptation head-on. You become familiar with discomfort and learn to navigate it without surrendering. Every time you resist a small immediate reward, you are training your mind to handle bigger challenges, to endure uncertainty, and to stay committed to goals that matter more than fleeting satisfaction. It is like exercising a muscle you didn't know existed. The more you practice, the stronger your will becomes, and the more capable you are of shaping your life intentionally. Delayed gratification also brings clarity to desire. When you pause before indulging, you begin to see what truly matters and what is just noise. You notice the difference between cravings that fade in a moment and values that endure across years. This clarity transforms decisions, relationships, and priorities. The things you once chased without thought start to lose their pull, while the opportunities that require patience, discipline, and sustained effort grow brighter and more compelling. You begin to invest only in what will last, in what will actually move the needle in your life. Over time, mastering delayed gratification becomes a quiet source of freedom. You are no longer a slave to impulses or the immediate environment. Instead, you navigate life with foresight, wisdom, and choice. Each decision to wait, to act with patience, to value the future over fleeting satisfaction, builds a life that is resilient, abundant, and aligned with your deeper purpose. You begin to realize that the world does not owe you instant rewards, but it does respond to consistent, thoughtful effort, and that learning to delay is not deprivation, it is empowerment. It is a skill that transforms ordinary moments into investments in a life of substance, control, and unseen but inevitable growth. The fifth key point is the skill of reading people, the subtle ability to sense intentions, emotions, and truths that are not spoken aloud. Most of us move through life assuming what we see on the surface is all there is, missing the currents running just beneath. But people are rarely as simple as they appear. Every word, every gesture, every hesitation carries a story waiting to be understood. Learning to read these signals is like learning to see the wind. It cannot be held, but its direction, strength, and patterns can guide every decision you make. It is a skill that saves time, energy, and heartache because it teaches you where to invest your trust and where to tread carefully. When you begin to notice these subtle signals, you start seeing patterns that were invisible before. A shift in posture, a fleeting glance, a tone of voice that doesn't match the words. These are all messages if you pay attention. People often tell you who they are without realizing it, and yet we miss it because we are focused on what we want to hear. The skill of reading people trains your awareness, sharpening your intuition so you can catch the hidden currents of motive and emotion before they sweep you off course. It is being in a room of rippling water and learning to detect the currents that pull beneath the surface. This skill also teaches caution and discernment. Life is full of interactions where intentions are mixed, where appearances deceive, and where trust given too quickly becomes a trap. By learning to observe, to listen beyond words, you can navigate these situations with greater safety and wisdom. You begin to recognize who carries consistency, who hides fear behind confidence, who seeks opportunity at your expense. The world is less frightening when you can read it, less confusing when you can interpret the subtle language of human behavior, and less costly when you understand what lies beneath the surface before making a move. Reading people is not about manipulation, it is about understanding. When you see the signals, you do not exploit them, but you choose how to engage in a way that is wise and authentic. It allows you to respond to situations with clarity rather than reacting blindly, to offer help when it will be received, to protect yourself when danger is veiled. It is like having a compass in a dense forest. You cannot control the forest, but you can navigate it with confidence when you know the direction the paths are taking. This skill deepens empathy. The more attuned you become to the subtleties of human expression, the more you begin to understand the internal struggles of others, their doubts, fears, and desires. You see the dissonance between what they present and what they feel. And this allows you to interact with compassion rather than judgment. It teaches patience and the ability to listen beyond words, to recognize that everyone is navigating their own hidden storms, and that understanding these storms can prevent unnecessary conflict and missed opportunities for connection. Developing the skill also sharpens your own self-awareness. As you learn to read others, you begin to see your own patterns reflected back to you in interactions, the ways your presence affects others, the signals you unconsciously send, the gaps between your intentions and the impressions you leave. It becomes a mirror, showing you not only the truth in others, but also the truth in yourself. You start to notice the subtle ways you contribute to misunderstandings, and you gain the ability to adjust, to communicate more clearly, and to align your actions with your purpose. Over time, the ability to read people becomes an invisible edge in every area of life. Decisions become sharper, relationships deeper, and conflicts less frequent because you are responding to reality rather than assumption. You move through the world with a quiet awareness, able to detect sincerity and deceit, opportunity and risk, connection and distance. It is a skill that does not make life easier, but it makes it more navigable, more intelligent, and ultimately more rewarding. Like tuning a finely crafted instrument, it allows you to hear the music in people and situations that most others cannot, giving you clarity and insight that quietly shapes the trajectory of your life. The sixth key point is the skill of mental reset, the ability to pause and clear the mind before it runs on autopilot, carrying old worries, old mistakes, and invisible burdens into every new moment. Most people live as if their thoughts are rivers without banks, flowing endlessly, sometimes calm, often turbulent, dragging them into frustration, anxiety, or rash decisions. Mental reset is the practice of stepping out of that current, even for a brief moment, and looking at your thoughts as an observer. It is not denial or escape, it is recognition, a conscious act of giving your mind space to breathe, to reorder, and to approach the world with clarity instead of chaos. When you begin to practice mental reset, you notice how much of your energy is wasted on repetitive loops, rumination over past failures, overthinking what might happen, or replaying conversations you cannot change. These loops are heavy, invisible chains that slow movement and cloud judgment. Resetting the mind is like cleaning a foggy window. Suddenly, the view becomes sharp, the colors vivid, the path forward visible. It allows you to distinguish between what truly demands your attention and what can be released. A gift that quietly transforms not just decisions, but the quality of every experience. This skill also teaches patience with yourself. When the mind is cluttered, small frustrations feel enormous, minor setbacks feel catastrophic, and fears appear larger than they are. By resetting mentally, you create a pause between stimulus and response, a space where emotions can settle and reasoning can return. You begin to see that most of the pressure you feel is self-imposed, carried from yesterday's mistakes or tomorrow's uncertainties. Mental reset reminds you that clarity does not come from force, but from stillness, from allowing the mind to recalibrate so you can act with precision rather than panic. Mental reset deepens your focus. Life constantly pulls in different directions, each demand clamoring for attention, and without a conscious reset, your mind fractures, scattering energy across tasks, relationships, and obligations. Learning to reset allows you to approach work, conversations, and decisions with full presence. It is like recharging a battery. When the mind is refreshed, even difficult tasks feel less overwhelming, and creativity returns to spaces that were previously blocked by mental clutter. This skill transforms productivity from frantic effort into deliberate, meaningful action. This practice also heightens emotional intelligence. By giving yourself moments to pause and observe your thoughts, you begin to notice the subtle undercurrents driving reactions: fear hidden in irritation, insecurity behind defensiveness, longing behind impatience. Recognizing these internal cues allows you to respond to people and situations with insight rather than reflex. Resetting mentally is not detachment, it is attunement. You become more sensitive to nuance, more able to navigate tension without being controlled by it, and more capable of creating harmony in interactions that once would have sparked conflict. Mental reset requires humility and self-honesty. It asks you to admit that you cannot carry every thought, solve every problem, or anticipate every outcome in a single moment. It asks you to pause and trust that clarity can emerge if you allow it. In practicing this skill, you learn that mental stillness is not weakness but a form of power. It is a conscious choice to step out of the storm and see the landscape clearly, to act from understanding instead of reaction, and to recognize that your mind, like any instrument, performs best when tuned and cared for, not overworked and ignored. Over time, mental reset becomes a quiet foundation for resilience, creativity, and calm decisiveness. You begin to notice the difference in how life feels when your mind is uncluttered, when choices are made with clarity rather than impulse, and when challenges are faced from a place of composure rather than tension. Each reset is a practice in returning to yourself, reclaiming your attention, and approaching the world as a participant rather than a victim of circumstances. It is a skill that quietly transforms not just how you think, but how you feel, act, and experience every moment, turning mental chaos into clarity and overwhelm into purposeful action. The seventh key point is the skill of strategic self-reliance, the quiet strength of knowing you can stand on your own feet, even when the ground beneath you shakes. Most people drift through life leaning on others for guidance, validation, or support, and while connection is important, dependency without foundation leaves you vulnerable. Strategic self-reliance is not about isolation or pride. It is about building a base so strong that no circumstance, no disappointment, no external judgment can derail your progress. It is the difference between drifting with the tides of life and steering your own vessel through storms. When you cultivate this skill, you begin to notice how often you have surrendered your decisions, your time, and your confidence to the expectations of others. You realize how easily the fear of being alone, of being wrong, or of making mistakes has dictated your actions. Strategic self-reliance teaches you to pause before seeking external validation, to weigh your choices with insight, and to trust your judgment even when it is inconvenient or lonely. It is like learning to light your own torch in darkness, rather than waiting for someone else to show the way. You create your own illumination and your own path forward. This skill also nurtures resilience. Life will inevitably challenge you, test your patience, and strip away conveniences you have relied on. When you are strategically self-reliant, these moments no longer break you, they refine you. You learn to depend on your resourcefulness, your preparation, and your inner strength. Every setback becomes a lesson in adaptability. Every obstacle a chance to discover hidden reserves of courage and creativity. You realize that relying on yourself is not about rejecting help, but about building the confidence that even if help is delayed or absent, you can navigate and overcome. Strategic self-reliance transforms how you approach growth. When you cannot rely solely on others to lift you, you take ownership of your learning, your habits, and your development. You stop waiting for permission or guidance, and instead seek knowledge, practice skills, and experiment with decisions that move you forward. It is like planting a tree whose roots you tend daily, slowly, steadily, and intentionally, knowing that the strength of the roots determines how high the branches can reach. Every step you take on your own builds momentum that compounds into independence, competence, and quiet confidence. This skill also sharpens clarity in relationships. When you are self-reliant, you interact with others from a place of choice rather than need. You begin to recognize who adds value to your life and who drains it, not because you are reactive, but because you understand your own boundaries and purpose. Dependence often clouds judgment, self-reliance clears it. You see who respects your space, who reciprocates effort, and who encourages growth, and this allows you to cultivate deeper, more authentic connections, where you are letting go of those that weaken rather than strengthen you. Strategic self-reliance encourages courage in the face of uncertainty. The world rarely offers guarantees, and waiting for perfect conditions often leads to paralysis. When you rely on yourself, you learn to act despite fear, to experiment despite doubt, and to move forward despite incomplete information. You develop a steady confidence rooted not in circumstance or external approval, but in the knowledge that you have prepared, learned, and strengthened yourself to meet challenges as they come. It is the difference between drifting aimlessly and walking with intention, even when the path is unclear. Over time, this skill becomes a quiet superpower. You are no longer swayed by the opinions, moods, or availability of others. Your actions are guided by your own insight and preparation. You face life with a grounded stability that allows you to respond rather than react, to act decisively rather than defer, and to create momentum even when the world feels uncertain. Strategic self-reliance is not about being alone, it is about being enough. It is a strength that radiates outward, giving you freedom, confidence, and the ability to shape your life intentionally from the inside out. When you look back on these 7 skills, the ability to listen deeply, to understand your own emotions, to say no, to wait for what truly matters, to read the world around you, to reset your mind and to rely on yourself, you realize they are not just tools but ways of being. They are quiet companions that guide you through confusion, frustration, and doubt. Life will still present challenges, unpredictability, and moments of discomfort, but with these skills woven into the way you move through the world, you carry a steadiness that cannot be shaken. Each of these skills asks you to slow down, to pay attention, and to choose intentionally. They ask you to notice what most people overlook, to feel what most people ignore, and to act from clarity rather than impulse. Together, they form a foundation that is both practical and profound, grounding you in the reality of your own capacity while opening space for growth, connection, and understanding. The power of these skills is subtle. It doesn't announce itself with noise, but it reveals itself in the way your life shifts, almost imperceptibly at first, then unmistakably over time. They teach you that the world does not need to change for you to move forward. The transformation begins with how you approach it. The storms that once threw you off balance become navigable. The uncertainties that once paralyzed you become challenges to meet with presence and composure. You begin to see that strength is not loud or forceful. It is patient, observant, and resilient. It is the quiet confidence of someone who knows that even in complexity, there is order to be discovered, and even in chaos, there is a way forward. When you carry these skills with you, every interaction, every choice, and every decision becomes an opportunity to act with clarity, compassion, and purpose. You learn to honor your own boundaries while understanding the world with nuance. You learn to act from insight rather than reaction. And in this balance, you find a kind of freedom, a freedom that comes not from escaping life's challenges, but from moving through them with calm authority, knowing that you are equipped to navigate whatever comes next. Ultimately, these skills are not about achieving perfection or controlling the world around you. They are about uncovering the parts of yourself that are capable, patient, aware, and present. They remind you that the life you want is not built on luck or external approval, but on steady, conscious choices, made moment by moment. They give you the quiet strength to face uncertainty without fear, the insight to see beyond the obvious, and the clarity to live in alignment with what truly matters. And as you step back into your life, carrying these lessons, there is a subtle shift, a sense of steadiness that was not there before, a sense of trust in yourself, and a sense of space to act, to think, and to feel with intention. The noise of doubt and distraction does not disappear, but it matters less because you are no longer moved by it. You move with purpose, grounded in the knowledge that the foundation you are building is yours alone, and that it will hold even when everything else feels uncertain. In this way, life becomes less about reacting to what happens, and more about choosing how you live, moment by moment, thought by thought, action by action. And in that choice, in the quiet discipline of awareness and self-trust, you discover a strength that is steady, enduring, and unmistakably yours. It is a strength that does not need to be shown, only lived.